Excellent. Okay. So welcome to Demystifying the English GCSE for Parents. I'll just keep letting the latecomers in as they arrive. Welcome. If you've booked a ticket for this session, it's because you've got a year 10 or 11 student at home and or that you're supporting, and you want to know how to you want to understand the GCSE because it is really complicated how it works, and support them. So that's what this session has been designed to do, particularly around this time of year, being an online teacher with quite a significant social media following. I get so many emails asking lots of the similar questions, and that's why I decided to put this session together, so I could kind of try and help everybody in one big go. Okay, so just to let you know how things will work, a quick introduction. Your mics have been set to off. Videos are optional. You can put it on if you want, turn it off, it's fine. And the chat box is open. So if you've got any questions or you want to sort of comment on things as we're going through, then you're very welcome to use that interactive element. Obviously, if I'm talking and trying to stay focused and not get too nervous, then I may miss the odd comment, and I apologise for that. The session is being recorded, but like I said, your videos are not being recorded, and I will send a link to the recording out to everybody who's booked a ticket. We will have a very short break halfway through. There'll be a choice of a breakout room to discuss revision methods with other parents, or have 2 or 3 minute break yourself. And this is not a opportunity for me to sell my courses and workshops, but of course many of you will be interested in those. So right at the end of the session, I've included a little bit about those. So if you want to, you can leave before that point. Okay. So just to tell you a little bit about who I am, in case you came to this session via maybe an Eventbrite channel and not from following me on social media. I am an English teacher with a degree in drama and English. I'm a qualified English teacher. I've got 10+ years of classroom teaching experience, teaching Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, and 4+ years of online teaching from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 4. And I know many of you, your children will have joined me in my viral lockdown lessons. So it's quite cool now, sort of coming up to 4.5 years later, to now be helping so many of them through their GCSE. I'm also a writer, presenter, literacy advocate and campaigner. I do a lot of work in those areas, and I have a holistic approach to teaching and learning. Right, so these are the things we're going to cover in the session. I'm going to really try to keep it to 45 minutes, but I am well known to be a waffler, so I'm going to try and stay focused. I've highlighted the top one in pink because that is the one, and it's the first one, that's quite complex and it's a lot of information. So if during that part you're like, oh my God, like it's just so much information, don't worry too much. You can sort of let it go like that if you need to. And I will also mention that everything that I mention throughout the session that has a link, you will be able to access it from a document that I'm just going to put into the chat box. You don't need to necessarily look at it now, but I'll give it to you just in case any of you get thrown out of the session but still need the document. So everything that I mentioned during the session, link-wise, is there for you. I will attach that afterwards as well with the recording. So, exam structure, skills, and assessment objectives. So this is essentially how what the exam entails. So I suppose in many ways this is the boring bit, but the very important bit, of course. English language is made up of 2 exam papers. Depending on your exam board, they'll be from 1 hour and 45 to 2 hours each. Paper 1 is reading and writing, and so is paper 2. But for AQA particularly, and Edexcel as well, it's sort of split into fiction and non-fiction. Now, I've highlighted in red, blue and purple some quite important things to mention. So I highlighted them so I wouldn't forget. So when we say reading, we're not actually talking about how well your child can read. That's not what they're being assessed on. They're being assessed on how well they can read and fully understand an extract. Paper 1, it's 1 extract, and paper 2, it's 2 extracts for most exam boards. And paper 1 will involve some creative writing, and paper 2, transactional writing. Creative writing will be a description, a creative description or a short story. And transactional writing is things like speeches, letters, newspaper articles, things like that. The English literature GCSE is also 2 exam papers, and they range from 1 hour and 45 to 2.5 hours. And that includes things like Shakespeare, 19th century prose, a modern text, which for many of you will be in Inspector Calls, and the anthology of poetry. It might be power and conflict, or love and relationships, or identity, and there's a few other clusters as well. And of course, unseen poetry, which tends to put the real fear in Year 11 students, the unseen poetry question, which isn't actually worth very many marks. So, you know, it's not the end of the world, that one. And just to give you an idea of the difference between the exam boards, the English language exams, if you're doing AQA, then paper 1 and paper 2 are both 1 hour and 45 minutes each. It's nice, and it's quite a symmetrical exam board, the exam, the way it is. And if you're with Educas, then your literature exam will be 2 hours for paper 1 and 2.5 hours for paper 2. So there is a little bit of variation there. I did start off by putting all of the information for each exam board on the screen, and I just thought it might actually bamboozle everybody, and it might not necessarily be that useful at this stage. But of course, you can find out that information from your school, or even just Googling exam details and then the name of the exam board. So in summary, and I probably could have just said this to start with, English language is 2 papers testing reading and writing skills, and English literature is 2 papers focused on analysing literature texts, and that's simply the difference between the 2. Yes, they're both English and they're both taught by the English teachers in the school, but they are very different exams. Yeah. So we'll quickly look at the assessment objectives. These are the things that are being tested, okay? Now, the wording might vary slightly by exam board, and you can see the percentages along the side are not fixed, and that's because this is taken from a government document that outlines what all exam boards must include in their English exams, so that there's consistency across the exam boards. I've linked these this document, the literature one and the language one, into the document that I put into the chat box. So if you wanted to have a closer look at that, you can. It sort of stipulates what texts they're allowed to test on and things like that. So I've just highlighted here the key vocabulary, because I think this helps us better understand what is being assessed in the exam. So AO1, they're there. This white bit is in that linked in the document, so you can have a look at that there if you want to. So AO1 is your teens' informed personal response supported by quotes. So how well they know the texts in literature, and how they can express their ideas and opinions about it. That can be really well developed just by talking to them about the text and what they think about the characters, and who's their least favourite character, and which character most reminds them of their Uncle Bob, and things like that. AO2 is their analysis of language form and structure, and that's how well they can explore the effect of, you know, metaphors and how things have been structured and so on. And marks are also given for use of subject terminology. So rather than saying the word vaulting, you'd say the verb vaulting, and being able to do that throughout. AO3 is context, and that's what your teen knows about the social, cultural and historical context of the text that they're studying. And I've underlined that supports your points, because a common mistake made by many year 10 and 11 students is that they will just chuck in lots of historical facts or information about, you know, the social setting of the text that they're studying. And actually, you don't get marks for that. You get marks when you use that information to help prove the point that you're trying to make. So it's important that they can link that in. And then AO4 is their written accuracy. So, you know, how well they've put their essay together and their spelling and punctuation. So that's literature. And these are the assessment objectives for language. So again, I've picked out the key vocabulary, and I've just sort of listed along the side the things that are being assessed. So what your teen needs to be able to show the examiner they can do. So the reading part of their exam, they need to be able to identify and select information, analyse how writers use language, use subject terminology. They'll need to be able to compare ideas. That's particularly on paper 2, and use quotes as well, which they'll be really well rehearsed at doing by now, I expect. Yes, Hazel's asked a really good question in the chat. Are the assessment objectives the same regardless of which exam board is used? Yes, so the assessment objectives that you see on the screen here for language and the literature ones I've just shown you are from the government document that stipulates to the exam boards what their exams must test. So there might be slightly different wording, and if you get like a simplified version of assessment objectives from teachers at school, the wording will probably be a bit different. So the writing part, which is the creative writing and the speeches and letters, things like that, they are being assessed on whether they can show the form, purpose and audience through their writing. I do a lot of work on that with in my language workshops. How organised their writing is, and by that we're talking about sort of how they've structured their ideas and whether it flows and whether they've got discourse markers and whether their paragraphs are, you know, make sense and are in the right order. The vocabulary that they use, is it sophisticated? Have they written with clarity, purpose and for effect? Which kind of, I think that one is just always like, does it sound good? Like, does it sound good? Is it fancy? And accuracy as well, which I didn't highlight with a red circle because it's hidden underneath the line underneath vocabulary. But yeah, technical accuracy is important too. And actually, it's quite a big chunk of marks. So for AQA specifically, I know that it's 16. I can't remember for the other exam boards, but yeah, that AO6 is worth 16 marks and AO5 is worth 24. So overall it's 40 marks. It's big, it's a big task. And then finally, the spoken language part of the exam, I've just put do not worry. Okay, you really don't need to worry about this whatsoever, unless you've just got a really, really nervous teen that is terrified of public speaking. Then obviously you'll just need to do your mum job or your dad job of sort of coaching them that it's going to be fine, but you don't need to do any other work on that at home. That is delivered by the school, it's graded by the school, it doesn't contribute to their overall grade, and it's just a component that the school have to say that they've assessed the child, that they can essentially hold a conversation. That's what they're being tested. So you don't need to worry about that one, the school will take care of that. Some schools make a massive deal about it. and rightly so. Oracy is really important. And other schools will just slip it into a scheme of work, and your team might not even really know they've even done it. They might just think they've done a debating module or something at school. So moving on to exam boards and adjustments for SEN. So we're going to start by just looking at the exam boards. There's some of them listed down the side there. We've got AQA, Edexcel, Educas, WeJEC, which is combined with Educas, and OCR. Make sure you check with your school which exam board your teen is using, because the exam structure is different. Some exam boards are really similar. So for example, when I do courses for on paper 1 and paper 2 for language, I can teach AQA and Edexcel at the same time because they're similar enough. But Educas not so much in some areas, particularly literature. The paper 1 and paper 2, they've got different things at different times. So make sure that any resources that you're using are exam board specific, or that they're not exam board specific, so then they're suitable for all of the assessment objectives and all of the skills needed. There's some suggestions here of things that you might search alongside the exam board. Yes, that's right, Sarah. Thank you. Although not all of Wales uses it. I've got a student that I've been working with on and off for years who's based in Wales, and I assumed that she would be doing Educas for that reason, but she's not. She's doing AQA. So just because you're in Wales doesn't guarantee that you're with Educas, but more likely to be, of course. Okay, so adjustments for special educational needs. This is not an area that I'm an expert in. However, if your teen, if you feel like they might need some extra support in the actual exam for whatever reason, then speak to the school. If you feel like the school are not giving you the support you need, or not enabling your child to have access to the arrangements that they need, then you can speak to CENDIAS, who will give you lots of really good impartial and confidential advice on that. And I have linked CENDIAS into the document I shared at the beginning. So it might be things like extra time. It might be that they have someone read the questions to them. It might be movement breaks. If ADHD, for example, is a real problem for them, and movement breaks are needed, or if they've got other neurodivergent conditions, that can be worked into their access arrangements, and a laptop to type. And I couldn't count the number of times that I've started working with a year 11 student online and their handwriting is really, really poor, but they have worked on it for years, and they are committed to improving it, but they are not able to write in a way that an examiner is just going to be able to read through and understand their work. And they haven't had any support from school to change their exam access arrangements. So if your child is trying really, really hard to improve their handwriting and only you can understand it, you and their English teacher, then speak to the school and see if you can get a laptop for them to type on, because examiners mark hundreds and hundreds of papers, and if they can't make head nor tail of what someone's written, then they can't award any marks for it. Okay. So how is English marked and what is a pass? Oh, this is a big one. This is a big one every August. So just in summary about how English papers are marked, because I expect some of you will be quite interested in this, particularly if you're paying close attention to how your teens' essays and mocks and things are marked. It's really, really, really complex. Examiners have to determine which assessment objectives have been met in an essay and to what quality, and then they need to find a best fit across all of them. So for example, and this is not an official mark scheme on the scheme, I will add, this is a much simplified version just to sort of highlight to you how things are marked. If an examiner felt that this particular student really is good at analysing the effects of writers' choices, really good at embedding quotes, but doesn't really use much subject terminology and only simple ones and not always appropriately, then they have to decide how many marks that they would award. So if you're looking at your students' work and you're thinking, well, they've done brilliantly on this, they should be getting a 7 or an 8, but they've only got a 3, there may be some reason, that a complex reason why. So every grade, apart from you, is a pass, and it's really important to remember that, particularly if your teen might struggle to get what we call a standard pass at grade 4. Reassure them that a 1, a 2, and a 3 are a pass. If they weren't a pass, they wouldn't have a number. It'd be you, wouldn't it, and start at 4. And a little bit of explanation behind that. So anyone who achieves a GCSE grade 1 to 3 gets what we call a level 1 qualification. And then GCSE grade 4 or above is a level 2 qualification. And lots of college courses will need you to, will be level 3 qualifications, and they'll need you to have level 2s to be able to go on to that course. So hopefully that should clarify why some students need a 4 or a 5. If they're going on to do A levels, and if they want to do English literature, then the sixth form might say, well, we need you to have a grade 6 because we need to know you're going to be able to keep up with the demands of A level English. So I can understand why sometimes, you know, a 5 or a 6 might be required. And a few more points around this before we have a quick break. Grade boundaries are determined by the spread of marks across the cohort. If you've got teens that have finished their GCSEs in previous years and you've looked at grade boundaries, they do change every year, but they change. I'm not a complete expert on how it's determined, but it is to do with how many 7s there are, how many 8s, and making sure there's an even distribution across them, which can be annoying, but that's the way it is. And it's always been that way. It's not a new thing. Resits can be part of an admissions offer for level 3 college courses if level 2 GCSE grades still need to be met. So that's why colleges might ask for a resit. And that is allowed. You can start a level 3 without having level 2 if you do a resit. And remarking exams, myself and many other educational professionals will only recommend that if you're less than 2 marks away from the grade that you desire. It rarely comes up more than 2 marks, and often not at all, and sometimes marks are lost as well, so you need to be prepared for that. And if that is something that you want to do, then you need to make the first contact with the exam board, and then the school can facilitate it, but the school can't say to the exam board that you want it remarked. It has to come from you first. But the school can support you in arranging that. And they'll surely tell you as well whether they think it's worth doing. They'll look at the exam script. They'll need to give the permission for the exam script to go back to the school for the teacher to reflect on, and then they'll tell you whether they think it's worth it. Okay, we're going to have a very quick break, just 3 minutes, in case someone needs to quickly go and check on dinner or check on sleeping babies or make another cup of tea. But what I am going to do is set up a breakout room. So if you want to have just a quick chat with some other parents about what revision methods have worked well so far for your teen, then I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now. Okay, because that's what we'll be talking about next, revision methods. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I've just reshared the PDF document I've mentioned a few times in the chat box, just in case you arrived after I had sent it, because I don't think you can see previously shared things in the chat box. So you can all access that this evening as soon as the session finishes, if you choose to. Okay, right. So we're going to talk now about revision methods and materials. So I'm just going to sort of talk through some of these bullet points. Okay. So first of all, it's really important to work out how your team likes to learn. So talk to them about revision methods and, you know, do they like reading model answers? Do they like making really pretty notes with, you know, different color coded things, or do they like using post-it notes? All different revision methods will have pros and cons. And, you know, you're all intelligent people. You can see the obvious ones. If you've got a really disorganized teenager, having loads of post-it notes everywhere is just going to be chaos for them and probably not help them stay organized. And things like flashcards, they're really good for memorizing information, but maybe not so good for skills-based subjects. So for English, like writing essays, I mean, the flashcards are helpful for literature, but they're not really that useful at all for language. So yeah, there are different methods for different needs, I suppose. The York Notes, oh, I was going to get some to show you. The York Notes workbooks and revision guides are excellent. I'm just going to grab one to show you. I was so convinced that I was organised and I forgot to bring in my demo things. So these revision guides are, I think, the best. And one of the things that I think is particularly good about them is in the back, it has sample essays. You're not really going to be able to see these, are you, because of the background? And the sample essays are annotated with where the students have met the assessment objectives. And I think that's a really powerful thing for students getting their head around what they have to do for the English exam, because you can write a really lovely essay with lots of nice ideas, but if it doesn't meet the assessment objectives, you're not going to get any marks for it. So I think that's a really good thing that all of the York Notes disappearing books. Yeah, that's what's particularly good about those. And all of the different texts and poetry collections are covered. So there's power and conflict poetry there. So I have linked those into the document as well. I didn't have time to put them all on my bookshop page, unfortunately, but you'll be able to find them quite cheaply on Amazon. The next thing that I think is really useful is model answers books. And I've got two to show you here. You can get some that are just, oh, it's power and conflict again. It's because I've pulled them from the same place on the bookshelf. This one is just model answers to read through. Maybe your team will find it useful annotating those for assessment objectives. But also, this one is a model answer workbook for English language. I particularly like this book, this exact one, if your teen is doing AQA, because it engages them with how to improve answers and picking out the best paragraphs across 3 different answers, and really gets them thinking about the assessment objectives. So I haven't linked that specific one in. So if anyone thinks, oh, I'd really, really like that for my team, then you can always email me afterwards and I'll send you a link. Maths and Physics Tutor website. You might be thinking, well, that's a bit weird because this is English. Maths and Physics Tutor covers all different subjects, and their English materials are excellent, really, really good for revision. You can print off some fabulous notes that your team could then annotate and highlight and so on. Mr. Bruff videos are excellent on YouTube. I've linked him in on the document as well. And he also has workbooks and study guides and things like that. And he really is an authority on writing well for exams. I'm hesitant to recommend any TikTokers. I don't use TikTok. I have concerns with the platform, with its safety for teenagers. But on Instagram, there are some really good English teachers doing some, really good content around GCSE material. People like, and these are included on the document, Giglit. Giglit's really good. Exam tips already are coming in. And Michelle Weaving, who is a tutor and examiner who I work really closely with. We actually deliver the mocks that I do in January. We deliver those together. And she's on TikTok and Instagram, and also Stacey Ray has got some pretty cool workshops and online content as well. So that's those, and I know teenagers sometimes do like to learn that way, so whatever works. I run a study skills course. It's a 3-part course, as usually once per half term. The next one's starting in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think. But that just looks at how to create a revision schedule, what different types of revision methods there are, and which ones might work best for them. And they sort of get to think about what type of learner they are and how they'd like to approach their studies. And it's quite empowering. But I think there's lots of like guides, and I know Collins and other educational publishers have study skills handbooks and things like that you can look at. All and some post-it notes that I'll talk about on the next slide. And of course, tutors. I don't offer any one-to-one tutoring anymore because I'm so full and so busy. But tutors can provide really good one-to-one help. If you're looking for a tutor, I think the best way to find one local to you or online is through word of mouth. But there are lots of websites where you can search for them. But if you don't get the right feeling or your team doesn't gel with them, then cut your losses and find one who does, I would say. And Michelle Weaving, who I mentioned, who is on Instagram and TikTok, she runs courses as well and does a lot of marking, like one-to-one marking. Okay, so how can you support at home? Oh God, this terrifies me. My eldest is almost 7, and I just keep thinking I've got like 9 years now before I'm going to have to go through this. So, Godspeed to you all getting through this year. So a dedicated workspace, of course, is going to be really important, somewhere where your team can always quietly work, if possible. I know it's not always possible. And I consider a wall. So those of you some of you may have come to my Facebook Live just during the exam season last year, and I walked students through how to do a quote wall. So you can just use your post-it notes and list all of the quotes that they have to remember for literature, and then list all of the methods and the techniques that are being used. And then analyze them and sort of build a big wall. That live is still on Facebook. You'll be able to find that on my Facebook page if you wanted to have a little look at that. If you've got any questions, you can pop them in the chat box. Okay, I will reshare the document at the end. Reading essay feedback together is a really useful way of getting to understand where your teen's strengths and weaknesses might be. Teens don't always take feedback very well, but I think as adults we can be a little bit more, we sort of have a bit more perspective, and we can help them, we can coach them if we know where their strengths and challenges are. Theatre trips for the literature texts are really good as well. So if you're able to get to the theatre and see an Inspector Calls or Macbeth, that can be really helpful for your teen, especially if it's something with a really complex plot. So if your teen is doing The Sign of Four, the Sherlock Holmes novel, that has got quite complex elements. So, you know, seeing things in the theatre, or when my next bullet point is Netflix and YouTube, watching film versions is a brilliant way of them just sort of getting that sort of story together and making sense of the events of the narrative, because they absolutely will need that for literature. Someone's asked me to go over the revision timetable. That's not something I'm covering in this session, but I was just explaining I do a study skills course. Okay, support the school's interventions if you can, if you feel like they're appropriate. The school will have a really good idea of what your child needs to be working on. So I would always say that the school is the first port of contact if you've got concerns, or if you're looking for extra support. Certainly before you then get a tutor, I would speak to school first. Tutors, workshops, courses. Obviously, I'm going to say workshops and courses because I offer them, and I think they provide a really nice different perspective on what's being taught in the classroom at school. Sometimes hearing things taught from a different voice and a different perspective can be really refreshing, and it might just connect with your teen, and it might really help them understand the texts and what they need to do to achieve well in the exams. I would say start now, whether you're in year 10 or 11. Don't leave it until Easter. Tutors, we don't laugh, but we all sort of like laugh every Easter when we just get bombarded with people looking for like to start one-to-one tuition, and it's just it's too late to make a big difference by that point. You need to really start now, I would say. And obviously, as parents, the most important thing that you can do is provide perspective and balance. It can feel overwhelming for teenagers. This is a lot that I'm talking about, and this is just 2 GCSEs. They've got so much that they need to get their head around. So it's really important as well that they feel that it isn't really the end of the world if things don't go according to plan. There are always ways to have a comeback. So signposting for further support. These are included in the, I'm just going to have somebody removed from the session. Okay. Okay. Right, so as I said, here's some information that you might find useful. And I would always refer you to form tutors, head of English and head teachers if you have any other queries. Right, I think a few teenagers are stuck in. Right, where were we? So that's the end of demystifying the GCSE and some suggestions around supporting your teenager to succeed in the exam. I'm going to very, very briefly just sort of give you a quick lowdown on the courses and workshops that I offer. So these are my upcoming literature workshops. They usually run on Monday evening, 7:15 till 8:15. And I cover a very broad range of texts and some of the English language skills as well. And these are just the ones that are lined up before the October half term, but I usually run about sort of 5 or 6 per half term. All workshops include a 30-minute pre-workshop task, a 60-minute live and recorded session, 60-minute post-workshop task. And if they send their work to me, then I'll give them light feedback on it, but it is, of course, optional. And they all have carefully prepared resources, including example essays and extracts. And the system is very similar to this one in that their mics are off, although I do allow them to put their mics on to ask questions or read things out. Videos are off or on if they choose to, but they're not recorded. And we tend to communicate mostly through the interactive chat box. So, you know, I might put out a question or ask them to order some information, and then they will all do that in the chat box, and then we'll discuss the range of answers we've got there. And they are suitable for those aiming for a grade 5 to 9. People are aiming for a grade 3 or 4 are very welcome, but I also try to include what people aiming for a grade 9 might need, and so that can sometimes feel a bit too overwhelming for those aiming for a grade 3 or 4. There is a free Macbeth workshop that I did last summer. It's the same format, that's on YouTube. So if you wanted to sort of test it out and see if it was going to work for you or your team, then they could go and have a little look at that. And the workshops are all £30, apart from the mocks, which are 50, so they're slightly different. They're longer as well. And Michelle Weaving, the examiner, is involved in those. I also run some scholarships where you get a lot of my content and courses and workshops all free, as well as some one-to-ones and coaching. So if you think that might be an option for you, then again, I've linked the document into the main document that I've sent. And I am running a nurture course in January, so that might be for those sort of working maybe around a 2 or a 3 or a 4 and aiming to get that 4 or 5 so that they can start their level 3 course at college without having to do any resits. Okay, good luck. I'm here by email whenever you might need me, or if you want to book any of the workshops or courses, then you can email me for more information. They are bookable on Eventbrite as well, and I have included the link in the document. So I'm just going to answer any questions in the chat box. Let's see. Oh, I was so nervous. I'm glad that we're at the end now. Do you do anything on Great Expectations and Julius Caesar and Lord of the Flies? No, actually, those are 3 texts that I don't have anything on this year, I'm afraid. I ran on a 2-year sort of cycle as well. So year 10s and 11s won't get the same workshops every year. They get fresh. Okay. That's a really good question about dyslexia. It depends on what it is that she finds difficult. Maybe talking to a dyslexia specialist at the school or those that were involved in her diagnosis might be able to make some suggestions. Different coloured paper can sometimes make a big difference, so there isn't that glaring white behind black. Maybe making notes at different stages of what she's read, even saying it out loud instead of reading it from the page. It might be a bit of trial and error. A really good online tutor for dyslexia, she's a dyslexia specialist, is Great Expectations Tutoring. I think that's what she's called. But if you email me, I can send you her details. But you'll find her on Facebook. Is it worth getting with the intention of watching the recording in the future? Can they still do the pre-workshop task and get feedback? Okay, that's a really good question as well. So all of the workshops, once the live has passed, you will be able to purchase it as a downloadable sort of workshop. So it'll be recorded rather than live. If anyone sends me their work and they've paid for a workshop, then I'm happy to give light feedback on it. Light feedback, I say, is usually 4 to 6 comments, with at least 2 of those being constructive on how to improve. I can't offer deep marking for everybody because I just would not, I just wouldn't have the time. I struggle to squeeze everything in as it is. But in the live session, sometimes they put paragraphs that they've written in the chat box, and I give feedback on those in a positive and supportive way, of course. Okay, someone wants the the document again. I will reshare it. I will send it now, but I will also reshare it. Oh, why won't it? Here we go. I will send it with the recording as well, so don't worry if you have missed it. Christmas Carol and Inspector Calls. Yes, I'm doing lots on both of those. Lots. They're two texts that I know really well. I tend to do lots of workshops on the ones that I know, I know especially well. So yeah, if you, on the document that I've sent, there is a list of all of the workshops that I'm running throughout the year, so you can pick and choose which ones that you want to sign up to. The English language courses will help, Rihanna, because those are not text specific or exam boards. Some of them are exam board specific, you'll have to check, but the ones that are looking at creative writing or non-fiction writing, they'll still be really useful. Okay. Oh, you're all so nice. Thank you for saying thank you and that it was helpful. Which text is better to start looking at for younger students, 11-year-olds? Oh, are you starting your GCSE journey now? I don't know. I've not started working with on GCSE work with children that young, I'm afraid. Oh, Kath, about ASD. Obviously, that's a common difficulty that students with ASD experience. A lot of talking through extracts and practicing. It's practice and doing a lot of work around the connotations of words. So they might go, that word is interesting. I don't know why it's interesting. Let me have a think about what the connotations might be. And they might have to do it as a step by step. I need to analyze this, and I have to step by step do these things to try and discover what's hidden in the text. There are definitely ways to do it though, but a lot of practice and a lot of talking through it. Yes, Mandy, I will, because it's a really, really good one. So I will certainly send that. You're very welcome, everybody. Will you be doing different texts next year? We're doing Inspector Calls, Christmas Carol, Macbeth for next year's exams. No, I do the same texts. I do all the texts that I know really, really well. And then I kind of like my own little CPD. I might develop my understanding of I've read them all, but to know them really well enough to teach. And then I'll just add them in every year. But I've got something like 25 different workshops across all the different texts lined up. So I will still be doing Inspector Calls, Christmas Carol, Macbeth next year. Oh, I'm so glad that some of you have found this so helpful. How would you improve a child's vocabulary at this stage? I would always say reading, but I can appreciate that if they're in year 11 and that they're not into reading, that you're probably a bit fed up with people telling you that it's reading. Like is it called Mrs. Wordsmith, things like that. Sort of flashcards. Quizlet do vocabulary training. So they could do like the Quizlet app on their phone. You can probably get vocabulary apps where they're sort of like, a fancy word a day type of thing. That might be really helpful. Right. So I think that's it. Like I said, you can email me. You can email me if you have any questions, or if you want to book anything, or if you're unsure of something. I am here to help. I do my best to get back to everyone very quickly, and as many of you will know, I've got 4 children under 7, so I'm quite time poor. So please just be patient with me, and I'll do my best. Okay. All of the exam workshops will cover Educast because they cover the text and the assessment objectives, not the exam questions specifically, Tracy. So yeah, if you're Educast, you'll be fine for the literature workshops. if they're in year 10 and they're studying them at the moment, then yeah, why not? Unless you think they're going to struggle to get a 4 next year because they'll be working at a level where it might frighten them more than support them. But if they're quite bright and engaged and interested, then yeah, I love it when year 10s come to the workshops because they just want to keep up with the year 11s that are sharing all these really great ideas and great sentences in the chat box. So it can be a really useful experience for year 10s. Definitely. But have a little look at the free Macbeth one on YouTube. I think that's linked into the document as well. And then you'll get a feel for whether they would really struggle with that or not. Okay. Right, I think we've run over quite a bit, haven't we? Goodness me, I haven't had my dinner yet. My husband's going to be going mad. Right. Yes. The AQA exam structure is the same every year. So whether if they're in year 9 now, then it will be the same in year 11. Right. It's been a real pleasure. I hope it's been useful for you all. And yeah, hopefully see your teens in some of my classes soon.